Hi everybody, how you doing? It's Primogen here, Chris. So, I am here to bring you all a little bit of an update on what's been going on with my channel, as well as what's going on with World of Darkness, because there's like a million billion things being worked on right now. And while I am extremely grateful for that, it also meant that I was sitting here a couple of days back thinking, what's actually being worked on right now? And I didn't know. I didn't know everything else. There is a brand new website, worldofdarkness.com, which has so much information, but I still kind of felt like I needed to find out what's actually being released and read up a little bit about it. So that's essentially what this video is. It's going to be roughly an hour as far as I can tell, which is a lot of time. But, you know, what don't I do for people who are in my position and don't know what's going on right now? Of course, there is information available. I know that Outstar is doing weekly World of Darkness news updates, but they're kind of spread out, and there's interviews going on, and there's some stuff that's not strictly related to content being released, so this is kind of going to be a boil down of all the products that are being made for World of Darkness and Vampire right now. As for me, what's going on with me right now, I just yesterday had my first session 0 with one of my patron groups. Stockholm by Night is getting started this summer. I'm going to have 2 more groups to do that with. If you're interested in playing with me, at least once every 2 months or more than that, it's in my Patreon as well. But if you want to do that, it's maybe you want to wait and see if I'm a good storyteller before you want to try it. But if you do, you're more than welcome. There's information on my Patreon as well as here and there everywhere. I am also still working on the Giovanni Chronicles stuff. It's been on a slow burn. It's you know, there's stuff going on. I just got summer vacation going, patron stuff happening. So Giovanni Chronicles will be here. It will have Foley work. I did get a license for like Foley audio, sound effects, stuff like that, but it's definitely going to take a while before I get there. So what is going to be in this video? I made a list over here, so I'm not even going to pretend that I'm not looking at this list because it's a lot. We will be going through all the computer games being made, and that will be Bloodlines 2, Earthblood, Heart of the Forest, Wraith, Afterlife, Shadows of New York, Swan Song, and Night Road, as well as 2 or 3 other games that's not on that list, but we don't really know a lot about them right now. And then we're going to go to tabletop and card games. So it's going to be Vampire the Masquerade Chapters, Vampire the Masquerade Heritage, Vampire the Masquerade Blood Feud, Vampire the Masquerade Vendetta, Vampire the Masquerade The Eternal Struggle, and the expendable card game. Sorry, I keep getting that messed up. Then we're going to go on to fiction and media. We're going to talk about the audiobooks that just got released. We're going to talk about the comics that are going to be showing up pretty soon. And finally, we are going to do a little bit about the role-playing games that are currently being worked on. We will mention, for example, Calls of the Blood Gods, as well as Let the Streets Run Red, which is kind of this little expansion pack for Chicago by Night, which covers the nearby area. We'll talk a little bit about Milwaukee by Night and Chicago, as well as, I believe, Indianapolis as well. For once, there's not a whole lot of content when it comes to role-playing games, but as you know, there was a literal shit ton of it in January, so that's certainly a thing. I am a little bit miffed that we still don't have anything about the player's guide for V5. I'm going to assume for a good reason. I would rather have a good product rather than a rush product, but guys, half of 2020 has passed. Where are the news? Tell us about the player's handbook. So unfortunately, there won't be anything about the player's handbook in this video. Hopefully later. Right, so let's get started, and we'll work our way backwards. So we're going to start with the role-playing games and work our way up to the computer games. You with me so far? Great, here we go. Currently, there are 2 tabletop role-playing game products on their way to the shelves that we know of, although Matthew Dawkins very recently revealed in an interview that there's at least 5 different books being worked on right now, just based on V5. The 2 books that are named are Cults of the Blood Gods, as well as Let the Streets Run Red. And Matthew Dawkins, also known as the Gentleman Gamer, is the in-house World of Darkness developer for Onyx Path Publishing, meaning he oversees all the World of Darkness lines being worked on by the Onyx Path, and often works on individual books as well, especially for Vampire. Matthew is also one of the people working on the upcoming Werewolf the 5th edition, and he's got his fingers in many, many different pies. Cults of the Blood Gods is a book I've already spoken extensively about in a past episode of The Beckoning, together with Jersh, Hadi, and Outstar, and I will post a link up here in the corner somewhere, there we go, but in case you just want a brief rundown. Basically, this book covers two different major additions to the V5 lore: the existence and creation of different forms of religion, worship, and, well, cults in vampire society. Everything from Methuselah worship to pyramid schemes, the Lilith worshipping Bahari, and so on. The second part is the detailing of the brand new clan of the Hekata. In essence, the Giovanni, as well as several other bloodlines of the Cappadocians, and presumably some who might not even have been Cappadocians to begin with, came together in something referred to as the family reunion. The old guard of the Giovanni have all been properly dealt with. Augustus is dead, or at least missing, and any Giovanni who were not okay with this new shift in management are either dead or being hunted down. Suffice to say, this is a pretty bold move to just bundle up these clans and bloodlines, but it is an interesting twist. A common criticism is why the Giovanni would suddenly decide to play along with this. There are several in-lore reasons for this, including the promise of 1528, which guaranteed Giovanni independence from the Camarilla, and that may soon run out. Few know the exact details of this agreement, thus if it's a 500-year limit, as some believe, it might be time to start consolidating your assets. Another reason presented is that many of the younger Giovanni were resentful against the Anziani, the elders of the clan, for their unwillingness to kind of move over and give younger Giovanni influence. That, coupled with the younger generation having had nothing to do with the purge of the Cappadocians, made it a reasonable move for a lot of them to kind of just abandon the old power structure in hopes of getting a better deal in the new one. Finally, the Hekata are also completely unaffected by the beckoning, the strange summoning that some elders experience that kind of gets them going to the Middle East for presumably the Gehenna Wars. This ties in with Beckett's theory that bloodlines are somehow divorced from their antediluvians and Methuselah, and thus free from their jihad machinations. Meanwhile, Let the Streets Run Red was a stretch goal for the Chicago by Night Kickstarter and is a collection of adventures, referred to as stories in World of Darkness, in and around the Chicago area. The book is currently in layout, which means it's very close to being finished, and the PDF might even come out as soon as within the next month for backers. Unfortunately, I was a complete idiot at that time and I missed out on backing it, so I'll have to order it from Storyteller's Vault when it shows up there. The 4 stories in this book will have vastly different themes and will also come with some pre-made characters, which is quite similar to how Modiphius handled it in Fall of London. Power Play, although it may also be Prey, I didn't quite catch the name, takes place in the heart of Chicago and focuses a lot on mortals and morality. There's only one other major kindred SPC in this story, and that is none other than Walter Nash, apparently a former Prince of Chicago, known from the Vampire the Eternal Struggle card game. The Dying Fields takes place in rural Illinois and has a very Children of the Corn, Wicker Man kind of feel to it. Because it is set in a rural area, it will also approach the usual power dynamics of vampire cities differently, showing how kindred in a small town might operate. Lost Innocence has us coming back to Milwaukee, the hometown of both the sires of Teresa and Jeanette Warman, as well as the former hometown of Karna and Dr. Mortius. Karna is now the leader of a new subgroup of Tremere in V5, and Dr. Mortius will make an appearance in Cults of the Blood Gods as the man who more or less invented sniffing elder dust. Yeah, that's exactly what you think it is. This story focuses on how Milwaukee has now more or less become a Camarilla police state, which is not surprising considering the events of the Becca's Jihad Diary, as well as the large population of werewolves nearby. And it revolves around the Princess Child, who has decided they've had enough of Milwaukee and essentially heads over to Indianapolis, which happens to be Ministry run. So not only will we get an update on Milwaukee, but likewise we will also see how the Ministry, formerly known as the Followers of Set, run an entire city. Finally, Gary, Indiana will see a return, and in case you're not familiar, Gary is where the Forged in Steel Chronicle took place, which was the example chronicle for the first and second edition of Vampire. Gary was a longtime rival city of Chicago's, and their two princes, Lodin and Modius, waged a war that Modius and Gary lost. This will include updated information on familiar SPCs, as well as Maxwell, the Bruja who was the Prince of Chicago before Lodin kinda just took it out from under his feet, and we will also learn what has happened to Modius, Gary's Toreador Prince, and Juggler, the quintessential Bruja Anarch. There's really not a lot of new content or news about Werewolf 5th edition, except that it's being published by Hunters Entertainment. One thing in particular, though, that stood out to me reading about it is this quote. "Yet it is also a game of defending what is important, about culture and ideology, about honoring tradition and adapting to change. In the battle for Gaia, outmoded customs and heritage can stagnate and prevent the adaptation to a rapidly growing and evolving threat." This tells us a lot of things about the upcoming game. The quote talks about outmoded customs, stagnating heritage, and the lack of adaptation to an evolving threat. This inspires me, as I've observed how in the Werewolf LARP scene there are two larger camps, the more traditional and the more progressive. This kind of clash between old and new among werewolves will, I hope, add an interesting additional element of role-playing opportunity, as well as make up for some previous stuff. All in all, I'm very hopeful for this game and I can't wait to hear more about it. So, that's the role-playing content right now. I'm still very disappointed, miffed even, that we don't know anything about the player's guide, but the content is on its way, and as you heard, there's like 5 different books being worked on, so I mean, with everything that's on its way right now, I'm actually kind of relieved. Not relieved, that's the wrong word, but I'm like, whew, guess I don't have to also read through a rule book on 300 pages while also doing all this stuff. So, you know, nothing bad that doesn't bring something good with it. Anyway, let's go talk about the fiction side of things. Kablam! Walk Among Us got released very recently. In fact, I haven't even had the time to listen through them yet. It's composed of 3 novellas with quite different themes to them, each actually just an audiobook. I'm fairly sure they are not available as readable books, at least not yet. The 3 books and their writers are A Sheep Among Wolves, written by Genevieve Gornichek, Fine Print by Cassandra Kaw, and The Land of Milk and Honey by Caitlin Starling. These 3 books are narrated by Erika Ishii, Zay Sands, and Neil Kaplan. Now, I am still listening to these, so obviously I can't tell you too much what they're about, but from what I've gathered, they've gotten some pretty good reviews lately, and from what I've listened to so far, it's a pretty good story. I'm some ways into A Sheep Among Wolves, and while the premise of the story is, it's not extremely original, I think a lot of people can relate to it. It's about a college freshman named Clea who just doesn't fit in. She's bullied by her roommate and her friends, she's had a hard time connecting with people, and she constantly feels like she's being observed and criticized by others. The book talks a lot about mental health, which I think is very good, and also shows how easy it is to get dragged along in something where you are actively appreciated and rewarded just for being you. I appreciate the insidious nature of this story, even though I haven't reached a point where that's very obvious so far. And while I think it might have had a little bit of a weak start, because, you know, it's not exactly the first time there's a story about a college student not fitting in, I think it serves as a decent contrast to what will happen later. The story of Fine Print takes place in Iceland, and follows what the author describes as a tech bro Ventru who learns the dangers of not reading the fine print in a deal for immortality. Iceland is a very interesting pick for the setting, as it's both a fairly small and tightly knit community, but also because, like Sweden, you get some pretty long nights during the winter and long days in the summer. Finally, The Land of Milk and Honey is probably the story I know the least about. It takes place on what is called a blood farm, which I assume we can all kind of imagine what that would be, and it's a story about ideals and ethics coming to a clash. Unfortunately, Caitlin Starling, the author of this one, didn't get interviewed during any of the World of Darkness news videos, so the only way to get more info on this book, I would say, is to listen to it yourself. Overall though, I'm sorry I can't provide more insight into these books, but they're all available in a bundle in a whole bunch of different places, and I think it's easily worth the money. There are also 2 comics being worked on. We haven't heard a lot about those for a while, but they are scheduled to come out fairly soon. July, in fact, and they are supposed to contain playable content as well, although the lid's been kept tight on what that actually might entail. Confirmed is that the majority of the cast will exist with stats, thus making them playable, or usable as SPCs in your own chronicle, and lore sheets have been mentioned as a possible addition, although not confirmed. But let's get into what they are about. So the 2 comics are Winter's Teeth, written by Tim Seeley, who also made the comic Hack Slash, a story about a slasher victim who turns the table on the villains that hunt her, and Misery Loves Company, being written by Teenie and Blake Howards. Teenie has worked for Marvel for quite some time now as a writer, and Blake is also a writer and a longtime storyteller and fan of World of Darkness. Devmalia Pramanik is the artist for Winter's Teeth, and Nathan Gooden does the art for Misery Loves Company, both comics being colored by Addison Duke. Both of these stories will interact with each other at certain points, with Winter's Teeth sort of being the main story and Misery Loves Company working up to it. They take place in the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and Winter's Teeth follows a neonate named Cecily Bain, who is a young courier and enforcer of the Camarilla. Cecily finds a newly embraced vampire who doesn't know her sire, and she takes her under her wings as they start to explore a conspiracy that threatens the very stability of the Camarilla. Meanwhile, Misery Loves Company is about an anarch coterie who have all been kindred for a while, and its emphasis is on group dynamics as well as being outsiders. The coterie will be investigating a murder linked to the previously mentioned conspiracy, and the major theme of these stories is also rivalries between these two cities and their kindred rulers. I'm very excited for this as well, and I'm really looking forward to the July release. Right, that's fiction. Pretty brief, all things considered, but really looking forward to the comics. Now, there are some tabletop and card games underway as well, and I've played a few of them. Some I didn't even know were being made, so some of these will probably be new to you. Some of them you might have heard about before. Some of them I've even reviewed on this YouTube channel or played with Jersh and Huddy before. I'll mention that in the description. Anyway, let's go and dig right into the tabletop and board games and role-play. No! Board games and card games. Sorry, it's been a very long day. My bad. Vampire the Masquerade Chapters is a narrative cooperative game developed by Flyos Games set in Montreal, the now formerly Sabbat stronghold of North America. It is 10 years after the city was taken from the Sword of Cain, but as anyone familiar with the setting book knows, there's plenty of nasty stuff lying in wait down beneath the surface. The aforementioned Matthew Dawkins has also contributed to the story of this, writing the introduction to set the mood for the story. Now, I did talk about this game quite extensively back in February when the Kickstarter was still running, so I will put a link to it up here. There we go. Essentially, this game plays fairly similar to titles like Kingdom Death and Gloomhaven. You're a group of vampires who play through several scenarios, making key decisions, and depending on your success or failure, you will progress through the story, level up, gain new tools and servants, and so on. And from what I played of the demo, this game looks to be really fun, and I'm particularly excited about the fact that it's playable as one person. I love board games, but I'm sure a lot of you listening can relate to me saying it's hard to get a group going for these things, especially in these times. Vampire the Masquerade Vendetta is a competitive card-based game by Horrible Guild where you each play a separate clan trying to score a victory over the city you're playing in. The game is hopefully going to be out before the end of the year, and this is another title I'm very excited about. You play as 3 to 5 players, all trying to get the position as undisputed Prince of Chicago. You work towards gaining influence, and the game is played in 3 rounds, each one more and more complex as you trick, bluff, and screw each other over. There's a lot of familiar faces showing up in this card game, both signature characters from the games themselves, as well as many people in the real world involved with the World of Darkness in one way or another. If you want to see someone play this game, I'll try to put a link to Jersh's video here somewhere as well, where he, Huddy, and I went at it. Vampire the Masquerade Blood Feud is a game I only just recently learned about, and it's apparently something called a mega board game being developed by Ben Canelos and published by Everything Epic. A mega game is basically a huge game played by lots of people and are almost event-like in their scope. Blood Feud is designed for 4 to 32 players with 1 to 2 storytellers managing it, and they're playing in it as well. And that, coupled with its shorter, more streamlined rounds of play, means that the games are not quite as much on a grand scale as others, but definitely more manageable. The game is round-based, and each round is based on real time, first round being about 10 minutes, with each round becoming shorter as time progresses. Aside from playing as a specific clan, you are also able to play as certain mortal factions like the City Hall or the Mafia. Each faction has special powers and goals, and they all also have background stories to immerse you in the game. There are 4 roles on each team, consisting of the marketplace, where you can buy and trade to improve your chances of success in the game, the cityscape, where you will move around your units and play your characters, as well as limit the maneuverability of your enemies. The orders, where you secretly scheme and plan for what happens to the board before everyone moves, and then finally the council, where there will be negotiation events affecting gameplay. The game is played in teams, meaning that communication is key, and there are added elements of storytelling scenarios and different ambitions for teams to put in variation and further specialization. Blood Feud is played over at least 2 different tables and can even be done in separate rooms, and it seems like a really cool game to run at, for example, office parties or at conventions. I'll be honest though, this game completely flew under my radar until I started researching it. It sounds really cool, but as I mentioned earlier on, it will be very hard to find the players to commit to this kind of game if you're running it at home. I think it would be awesome to have it at any kind of convention, however. And by the way, hey Paradox, when are we getting WodCon? And by the way, you can credit me for coming up with that name. And it seems to run fairly quickly, which is a huge bonus when you're involving as many players as this. Blood Feud ran on Kickstarter, but is still open for late pledges in the Pledge Manager if it sounds like something you'd be interested in. Vampire the Masquerade Heritage is a game I pledged to a long time ago and has almost again pledged to at least 3 times since then. It's just that cool. If you've been on the White Wolf Wikia lately, you will have noticed that quite a few signature and lore characters have gotten new artwork, and that's mostly from this game. It's being created by Babis Janios with artwork by Lucas Sigmund and is being released by Nice Games. Heritage essentially plays out over roughly 700 years and is about building a legacy. It's for 2 to 4 players, and each player requires about 20 minutes to play per game. The whole game is split into 7 different eras, and each will have about 3 chapters, or games, meaning it will take roughly 1 hour per player to get through an era. Plenty of gaming to be had. And from what I've gathered of this game, it seems to heavily revolve around key events in vampire history, where you get to influence them appropriately. There is a demo out for Tabletop Simulator as well, which I unfortunately haven't tried, but I will try to play it as soon as I can. The game is split into 7 different eras, like I mentioned before, all with different backgrounds, and there's a really nice walkthrough of each era over at the Nice Game Publishing YouTube channel. I'll try to link that in the description. The game seems to be a little bit delayed, unfortunately, as it was scheduled for release in spring 2020. But hopefully it will be around soon, as this is a game I'm really looking forward to playing, not the least because my beautiful Angel of Cain Sasha Vikos is in it. Vampire the Eternal Struggle is seeing a revival and reimagination as well. The 5th edition box is planned for release in 2020 and is being worked on by Black Chantry Productions. Longtime fans of that game will remember it fondly, although this card game will not be quite the same one as the previous versions. Vampire the Eternal Struggle will have pre-made decks and will not be released with booster packs. This removal of the element of randomness is a conscious decision, and while there will be future packs released, they will all be self-contained. That being said, a significant amount of the old cards will still be available either in bundles, decks, or print on demand. There's also a feature to create your own cards with the print on demand services. There are possibilities that limited time content will be released along tournaments and such, but nothing that has been confirmed yet. Rarity, thus, is more or less no longer an issue, aside from how many of a card will be in a bundle. There are over 3,600 cards in the pool of the Eternal Struggle, which is quite a lot, so there's already work being done by the player organization Vampire, Elder Kindred Network, to create a limited tournament format with restricted card pools. Not all of the old cards will make a return, but a significant number will. There are many reasons for this, ranging from the cards no longer being relevant to them having dubious contents and depictions. The upcoming 5th edition boxed set will have 5 pre-constructed decks, a rulebook, blood counters, and anything else you might need to play. The 5 decks will be Malkavian, Nosferatu, Toreador, Tremere, and Ventru. There are also several other decks, including introductory decks, pre-constructed ones, and bundles. At the same time, work is also being done on something called the Vampire the Masquerade expandable card game, being created by Renegade Games Studios, scheduled to also be released this year. Scott Jera is the publisher, and he's known to have been pursuing this license for Vampire for nearly a decade. All that is needed to play this is a starting box, and future expansions will be released as well. The starting box has 4 clan decks available, although it is currently not known which 4 clans that will be, although Outstar played as a Bruja when she tested the system out with some other people over at White Wolf. The game evokes a similar feel to it as a role-playing game, although role-playing is of course not a necessity, and each clan plays very differently. The Bruja were actively and aggressively working the streets, while the more social clans were manipulating mortals and using political influence to their advantage. There can also be different agendas and rules for winning to vary the game. Second Inquisition and other factors outside of player control may become relevant during the game, so sometimes it might be worthwhile to momentarily cooperate with another player. This game was supposed to be showcased at Gen Con in August, but as Gen Con has now been cancelled for this year, hopefully we will still get some news sometime soon. And I think that's it for board games. Whew. As you can tell, there is a lot of stuff in the works right now, and I'm really sorry I wasn't able to dig up more information about all these games. I had some trouble basically finding time for it because I wanted to get this video out this week. Still not sure if it's going to come out today or Sunday or Monday. Might even come out next week, who knows. But there is a lot of stuff being done. I will try to link to everything in my description, but if there's no link to the stuff I'm talking about there, I can tell you that googling it or going to the worldofdarkness.com website is going to give you more information, access to their websites. But anyway, that's it for board games and card games. Let's move on to computer games. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them too. I would know. I wrote 4,000 words about them, so here we go. Night Road is one of 3 interactive novels being released by Choice of Games, who have a long history of publishing games in World of Darkness adjacent settings involving vampires and werewolves. Kyle Marquis is working on Night Road, and it's scheduled for release this summer. Keep in mind, these are not visual novels in the vein of Coteries of New York, but rather much more like choose-your-own-adventure novels with much more text, thus able to create a more detailed story. In Night Road, you play as a courier initially working for the Camarilla, and since Shreknet has been abandoned by the Camarilla after it got compromised, they're now turning to more conventional means of communication with each other. Couriers have been popping up, and they travel the long and dangerous ways between cities in order to deliver messages, items, and even kindred. I say dangerous, and I mean it. Aside from the sun being a constant threat, of course, mortals, werewolves, and other kindred may take exception to you invading their territory. There will be a lot of interaction with people whose property you may or may not be on, and at times you will encounter horrible scenes of either your or someone else's making. Also, note, there have been no mention of werewolves, but a man can dream, right? You will be able to customize your courier in terms of gender, having the option of non-binary, female and male, and you will also be able to pick your clans and disciplines. The game is also aiming to try to be as inclusive as possible when it comes to having people of color as characters, as well as queer representation in it. You will have skills that can grow through experience, and there are many times where you can choose to act in certain ways to influence your courier's personality. You will also be able to choose sides, of course, whether you want to go Anarch, Camarilla, or something else. You will also have a wide variety of cars to work with, and all of which you can modify. And apparently you can also get so broke that you have to break into an impound lot to steal an old Pontiac to have something to get away in. About half of the game will have you traveling in the American South, the game taking place in Arizona and Texas, among other states, and you will also stumble upon old government research facilities and stuff like that. There are romance options in the game, as well as the option of getting a ghoul and a wolf companion if you got animalism. Rage frenzies have been implemented as well, so the beast is certainly going to be an issue, and you will also meet a lot of different SPCs that you can interact with. So far, Night Road is somewhere between 300 and 400,000 words long, and there is a lot of variation in the story being told. The other 2 titles are Out for Blood, scheduled for Spring 21, and being written by Jim Tatio, and Parliament of Knives by Jeffrey Dean, slated for Summer 21. Out for Blood will focus on your character being a mortal who has recently moved to Jericho Heights in Chicago, where they learn about the presence of vampires and become a vampire hunter. There are elements of youth drama as well as vampire politics, as there are both elder vampires as well as thin bloods involved. Romance is a factor in the game with the option of being gay, straight, or bisexual, and like with Night Road, you can also choose your character's gender presentation. True faith is also a possibility in this game, which can work really well against vampires. You can choose to hunt the vampires, take a side in their conflict, and maybe even join them. Parliament of Knives takes place in Ottawa, in Canada, where your sire has just become the temporary prince of the city, as the previous one has just gone missing. It's up to your sire to manage things while he's gone, and you decide if you will help your sire play the court, all the while balancing your relationship with the local anarchs, or bring her down. These 3 stories all really seem to complement each other, as they are all with vastly different approaches to the setting of Vampire the Masquerade. I'm very much excited to play them all. Big surprise, I'm excited to play any of these games. And you can bet I will be reviewing Night Road when that comes out. Although I'm not sure I will stream it, as I think that will take like 100 billion years if my playthrough of Coteries is anything to go by. Let me know in the comments if you'd want to watch me read roughly 400,000 words while going off on weird tangents about lore and stuff like that. Another upcoming title that has kind of flown under the radar is Big Bad Wolf's Swan Song. Big Bad Wolf are the people behind the mystery-solving game of the Council, an episodic interactive graphic adventure video game. I mean, well, if you're familiar with the type of games that Telltale Games used to make, you wouldn't be far from the mark. I started playing the Council a while back, and I was very pleasantly surprised by it. Unfortunately, spring has allowed me very little time to get truly immersed in anything, although I did have a deep dive into PC Building Simulator, so I'm going to put the Council as one of those games I will definitely finish this summer. As for Swansong though, it will actually have its first reveal on July 7th together with the gameplay trailer of Earthblood. There's not a whole lot more to know about Swansong yet, but I have sussed out that you will be playing as 3 different kindred who will need to work together, get over their bias, and investigate a threat that might bring the Camarilla crashing down. The Camarilla being threatened, a tale as old as time, but relevant. And if the Council is anything to go by, I'm going to guess the writing will be top-notch, and hopefully we'll also get some really good voice acting with it too. Heart of the Forest is another upcoming game that we don't know a whole lot about yet. It was announced recently and can in a way be considered a sister game to Earthblood. It is about werewolves, but it is sort of an interactive fiction-esque narrative story kind of game, focusing more on the less known parts of the lore. The creators, Different Tales, have made Wanderlust before this, not to mention they also made the first Witcher game, which is not a game I've played, I mean Wanderlust, not Witcher, but it gives me some serious Backpacker vibes. Anyone remember Backpacker? No? Just me? Anyway, just like Night Road, this is not a visual novel, focusing instead primarily on a text-driven narrative with some visual elements to it. And speaking of visual novels, Shadows of New York is likewise on the way. This is a standalone expansion to last year's Coteries of New York with a different main character, but many returning familiar faces. In Shadows of New York, you will be playing as Julia, a member of Clan Lasombra who is now joining the Camarilla. New York, as we know, belonged to the Sabbat for a very long time, only recently lost to the Camarilla in the late 90s. Therefore, it's not a surprise that your character, being Lasombra, will be slightly mistrusted by a lot of people in the city. The Abyss will be introduced as an element in this game as well, and if you are unfamiliar, it is essentially the source of the Lasombra's power and control over the shadows. Some even speculate that the Lasombra Antediluvian himself is the Abyss, or at least has merged with it, and it has a similar effect on Lasombra as the beast does to most vampires. By using the Abyss, it threatens to corrupt the wielder, and in the V5 rules, you risk staining your humanity with some of its powers. I'm going to guess we'll see a similar system in Shadows of New York. Benoit will make a reappearance in this game as well, and if you don't remember him, he's the religiously philosophical guy you met outside the church in Coteries of New York. He talks a lot about the nature of vampirism, about being cursed by God, and the possibility of an eventual redemption. Benoit wants to change the protagonist to make her see things his way, but it is also possible to flip the tables and make him abandon his views for Julia's. Samira of the Banu Hakim is a new character as well, who is seemingly close to Prince Panhard. She heavily dislikes the Lasombra, but sees potential in Julia and can become a powerful ally or enemy. Samira will, like Benoit, try to bring you to her side of things, this being the much more concrete and lethal politics of the Camarilla. You won't need to have played Coteries of New York to enjoy Shadows of New York, but it's pretty much a given that there will be a lot of callbacks and references to the previous game, which, speaking of, I should get back to. There's been a lot of patching, additions of new art and content, all of which completely passed me by, so it's definitely worth checking out once again. There's been some new reveals when it comes to Bloodlines 2, the biggest one of course, that Damsel is back. And Damsel, in case you missed her, is an Anarch Bruja who showed up in Bloodlines 1, and who has also made a cameo appearance in the actual play Vain Pursuit, that was being run by people over at White Wolf. Now, I could start investigating her appearance and what role she's going to fill in Bloodlines 2, but instead, I am going to point you towards Jersh of Gaming FTL and Strange Adventures, who just released a video discussing this very topic. They also recently announced a very limited set of collector's edition for Bloodlines 2. Only 3,000 copies would be made, which means I'm almost 100% sure that they are sold out by now, but on the off chance that they're not, you get some pretty nice swag with this one, including a really cool Elif statuette. And that's about it, right? Wrong. There's still 2 more games being worked on. There's the Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood game, which I did a little bit of a trailer view together with you guys about is it a week ago or 2 weeks ago? Kind of lost grasp on time. I will be talking a little bit more about the trailers there and some stuff I've noticed since then and some stuff that my patrons have helped me out with. And then we're going to be talking about the Afterlife game, the Wraith the Oblivion virtual reality horror game, which honestly is the one thing that has finally convinced me to get a virtual reality headset. I will be saving money for that because, damn, those things aren't cheap. So, here we go. Let's start with Wraith the Oblivion, Afterlife.
In Barclay Mansion, even the dead are terrified. Something happened here. Something vicious and cruel. And no one got out alive. Not even you.
Wraith the Oblivion is a game about ghosts, basically. I mean, not everyone who dies becomes a wraith. In fact, the vast majority don't, but spirits with enough regret or frustration over unfinished business may find themselves remaining behind even after their mortal shells give up the ghost. The game is going to be VR only. Now, up until I heard this, I had remained skeptical about VR, but you can bet your top dollars I'm planning on getting myself a headset now. I am also one of the biggest cowards I know, personally, so I can assure you that I will be streaming myself playing this game. Afterlife takes place in and around a large building named the Barclay Mansion. You are recently deceased and are not quite sure how or why you died or who killed you, and a strange voice in the back of your head is the only one who seems to know what's going on. The game is reminiscent of Alien Isolation and Amnesia: The Dark Descent, meaning focus is on tension, some slight puzzle solving, and avoiding getting brutalized by some unspeakable, horrifying evil that lurks in the shadows. There will be more emphasis on slow build-up of horror rather than jump scares as well, which I can't really decide if it's better or worse. I guess for a weakling like me, it's all going to be horrible, no matter which way you do it. The Barclay Mansion has a history of people dying in it, so part of the story will be to unravel what actually happened in there. The Shadow, your disembodied companion, will be the narrator, but as anyone who's played Wraith knows, the Shadow is also the thing that's trying its damnedest to turn you into a specter, a vengeful spirit who wants nothing more than to drag everyone else into oblivion with it. So obviously, you will be dealing with an unreliable at best, actively hostile at worst narrator. You will slowly be acquiring some powers as well. They're called Arcanoi, or Arcanoi, not sure how to pronounce that, and there's a lot of emphasis on finding snippets of information throughout this massive house. You will also encounter specters, remnants of some of the people who died here, often reliving or otherwise embodying in some gruesome way their deaths. Fast Travel Games, the company producing Afterlife, are very experienced working with VR games. In fact, they have been doing just that for the last 4 years. At this point, even though the game is only just now able to provide some gameplay footage, many of the team at Fast Travel Games are no longer able to play the game because they are terrified of it. They are also working on making it accessible as well, trying to figure out ways to compensate for motion sickness and such, and movement will be either free locomotion or physically based. The story takes place in modern times, and after the Sixth Great Maelstrom, known as the Week of Nightmares for vampire players, which kinda messed up a large part of the Shadowlands. But the developers have said that they have been going at the lore in a light way in order to make the game enjoyable and accessible by people who might not know so much about Wraith. That being said, there will however be hints and Easter eggs for veterans of the RPG, as well as the World of Darkness in general. There will be more revealed August 27th, when the first bits of gameplay content are planned to be revealed. But if you want to learn more about Wraith in the meantime, I can strongly recommend you check out Huddy von Schland, who's very recently started covering the lore of Wraith the Oblivion on her channel. Now, finally, there's been a whole slew of new screenshots and materials released for Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood. First of all, let's talk about Kahal, the main character. Kahal is a Hamid Arun Fianna. That means that he was born as a human, under a full moon, to the tribe of Fianna. Werewolves can be born in 3 different ways. Also, you can't actually become a werewolf, you're born as one. Werewolves born to human parents are called Homid, and to wolf parents, Lupus. If two werewolves mate and have a child, that child will be sterile and often suffer from some manner of deformity. These children have long been considered anathema to the werewolves and are often shunned, especially by some tribes. Even so, other tribes have grown to accept and welcome them into their fold, but there is still a lot of stigma involved when two werewolves have a child together. Each of the 5 phases of a moon have corresponding castes or auspices in werewolf society. Ragabash, Thurg, Philodox, Galliard, and Arun represent respectively new moon, crescent moon, half moon, gibbous moon, and full moon. You can find more information about this on my channel. I have a couple of lore videos on werewolf. I'm just giving you the basics here. An Arun, which is what Kahal is the fiercest and strongest warrior amongst the Garou. They are the warlords and champions who will rage like none other. Finally, there are roughly 13 werewolf tribes, although they used to be more. Some of these were killed by other werewolves, others have fallen to the Wyrm, the corrupting force that threatens Gaia, essentially our world, and who is the driving power behind Endron, the company that are the main antagonists in Earthblood. Fianna, Cahal's tribe, are said to be of Celtic origin and are often presented as friendly, outgoing, partying souls with a penchant for writing songs and poems. The Fianna are passionate in all they do, and it is not uncommon for the third breed to be born in their tribe. But they are also known to be particularly hard on them, considering them twisted both inside and out. The glyphs of these 3 factors, Homid, Arun, and Fianna, all show up in the trailer. But there is a 4th glyph that can be seen on Cahal's shoulder, and that is the glyph of the Ronin. Garou, or werewolves, are almost always members of a pack. The ideal pack would have 1 member for each of the 5 auspices, but that is rare in these days as the Garou are few in numbers. Some Garou, however, whether by choice or not, no longer have a pack or a tribe, and they become in essence Ronin. Some Ronin may eventually group together, but clearly Cahal has not. It is revealed on the Earthblood website that Cahal chose this life after having succumbed to an overwhelming rage. It is not unheard of for a Garou to fall to the Wyrm if their rage becomes too great, where they are capable of performing some really unspeakable acts in their fury. We do not yet know what happened during Cahal's rage, but he did leave his tribe and pack behind not long before the beginning of this game. Yet now he's searching for his missing daughter, and he is reunited with his lost pack. Interestingly, in the trailer, we can clearly see him joined by 5 Garou. It's quite possible that someone replaced him as the pack's Arun later on, which could present some interesting dynamics if they turn out to be his pack, in fact. Endron, the main antagonist of this game, are a subsidiary of Pentex. Pentex is essentially all the worst aspects of rampant capitalism and consumerism with a big extra helping of supernatural corruption. Endron is currently doing some massive logging in the state of Washington, where presumably a large portion of the game will take place. The Wyrm is a part of the trifecta of balance. The Wild creates, the Weaver shapes, and the Wyrm destroys. Yet the Weaver is said to have caught the Wyrm in its web, unwilling to see what it had made destroyed, which ultimately drove the Wyrm insane to the point where it decided the destruction of everything. Cahal will also be able to assume 3 different shapes during the game: Homid, Lupus, and Krynos. Human, Wolf, and Wolfman. There's 2 more, but they're not going to be in the game. The human form works well when you need to interact with other humans. The wolf form is excellent for stealth, and Krynos, or Wolfman, is designed by Gaia to be her ultimate weapon against servants of the Wyrm. Speaking of servants of the Wyrm, by the way, you will notice some obvious corruption surrounding both the buildings and people working for Endron. The Wyrm employs something called Bane spirits, corrupted spirits who seek to possess people, animals, places, and even objects to spread the taint of the Wyrm. A human possessed by a Bane spirit will eventually mutate into a Fomori, a truly corrupted and twisted creature who deserves only the mercy of a quick death. While looking through some of the concept art and screenshots, I noticed these 2 things as well. Here we see a tattoo that resembles the Children of Gaia's glyph, and presumably this might be one of your former coterie members. There is also another Garou whose design seems to hint at them being the 3rd breed of Garou, the one where both parents are werewolves, with the Octina glyph, a Native American tribe, in the background. Finally, there are these 2, where the Garou on the left seem to be the token female Garou of the group. And I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that design choice, as I much more prefer the hyper-muscular hulking monster type we see in a lot of the art from 2nd and Revised Edition. And the less we talk about female Garou in the 1st edition, the better. Anyhow, I'm super excited for learning more about this game, and we will be getting some gameplay footage on July 7th at Nacon Connect, an online showcase by the publishers Nacon, who happen to be releasing this title. Earthblood is being developed by Cyanide Studio, and I wish them the best of luck. This game, combined with the previously mentioned Heart of the Forest, will hopefully showcase the absolutely amazing setting of Werewolf the Apocalypse and its dichotomy of spirituality and brutality. I think that's it. I honestly, I don't know. There's probably more stuff that I haven't been able to find. I hope I covered it all. Thank you so much for sticking with me, because this video is long. It's very long. A lot of information in it. I probably talked way too fast. Subtitles is definitely something I need to get back on. Also, just a little message to White Wolf and the people at Paradox and everyone else. What the hell? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm super excited and this is great and I'm very happy. And oh my god, we're living in the renaissance of World of Darkness. But pace yourselves. Are you okay? Do you need help? Because, I mean, this is like, what, 20 different products? It's just so much in the works. How much money are you pouring into this? I don't want to know because I'm worried I'm worried about you guys, all right? But thank you so much for bringing so much life, so many cool things into World of Darkness again. As a longtime fan, I am so excited about all of this. I don't know where to start, but definitely will be spending a lot of time this summer just checking that stuff out, poking around, trying to keep up with news, maybe post news more often so I don't have to create a monster like this video. Anyway, that's about it. Go check out Huddy and Jersh, Outstar as well, obviously. If you're interested in playing games with me, you can check out my Patreon at the $25 tier and above. I will be running games for you. It's a pretty complicated system. I can work you through it if you're interested in that, of course. Some of the games might get published on my channel, depending on how the players feel about it. But chances are they might not be. So if you want some insight into Stockholm by Night, this custom chronicle I'm making together with these fine people I will be playing with, then that's where you're going to check it out. Giovanni Chronicles on its way. Going to estimate maybe July for the first episode. I hope. We'll see. I want it to get really good. I want it to have a lot of sound effects and music to it, so that's going to take a long while. I'm also writing all the dialogue, and bit of a personal issue. I've been having cramps in my arms lately, so I need to look into that. Might have been typing a little bit too much, but it's worth it because I'm very happy about the content that's coming out. Anyway, that's enough blabbing for me. Thank you all very much for sticking around. Thank you so much for watching me and for the support. This channel is not even a year old, and we're very close to 5,000. So if you have friends you know who are into World of Darkness, wouldn't it be cool if I hit 5,000 before July the 9th? Because that is the anniversary of my channel, which I am also planning something for, so keep your eyes peeled for that. So until next time, thank you all for watching. Stay safe out there, because Gehenna is out there somewhere. It's probably coming right at us. Gotta use your... cool. I am so tired. Bye.